Book 3, Chapter 13. The young actress and Giannetta had returned from the theatre, and Viola, fatigued and exhausted, had thrown herself on a sofa, while Giannetta busied herself with the long tresses which, released from the fillet that bound them, half concealed the form of the actress, like a veil of threads of gold. As she smoothed the luxuriant locks, the old nurse ran gossiping on about the little events of the night, the scandal and politics of the scenes in the tireroom. Giannetta was a worthy soul. Almanzor, in Dryden's tragedy of Almahide, did not change sides with more gallant indifference than the exemplary nurse. She was at last grieved and scandalized that Viola had not selected one chosen cavalier, but the choice she left wholly to her fair charge. Zegri or Abencerrages, Glyndon or Zanoni, it had been the same to her, except that the rumors she had collected respecting the latter, combined with his own recommendations of his rival, had given her preference to the Englishman. She interpreted ill the impatient and heavy sigh with which Viola greeted her praises of Glyndon, and her wonder that he had of late so neglected his attentions behind the scenes, and she exhausted all her powers of panegyric upon the supposed object of the sigh. "And then, too," she said, "if nothing else were to be said against the other signor, it is enough that he is about to leave Naples." "Leave Naples? Zanoni?" "Yes, darling. In passing by the mole today, there was a crowd round some outlandish-looking sailors. His ship arrived this morning, and anchors in the bay. The sailors say they are to be prepared to sail with the first wind. They were taking in fresh stores. Leave me, Giannetta, leave me." The time had already passed when the girl could confide in Giannetta. Her thoughts had advanced to that point when the heart recoils from all confidence, and feels that it cannot be comprehended. Alone now, in the principal apartment of the house, she paced its narrow boundaries with tremulous and agitated steps. She recalled the frightful suit of Nicot, the injurious taunt of Glyndon, and she sickened at the remembrance of the hollow applauses which, bestowed on the actress, not the woman, only subjected her to contumely and insult. In that room the recollection of her father's death, the withered laurel and the broken chords, rose chillingly before her. Hers, she felt, was a yet gloomier fate. The chords may break while the laurel is yet green. The lamp, waning in its socket, burned pale and dim, and her eyes instinctively turned to the darker corner of the room. Orphan, by the hearth of thy parent, dost thou fear the presence of the dead? And was Zanoni indeed about to quit Naples? Should she see him no more? O fool, to think that there was grief in any other thought! The past, that was gone. The future, there was no future to her, Zanoni absent. But this was the night of the third day on which Zanoni had told her that, come what might, he would visit her again. It was, then, if she might believe him, some appointed crisis in her fate. And how should she tell him of Glyndon's hateful words? The pure and the proud mind can never confide its wrongs to another, only its triumphs and its happiness. But at that late hour would Zanoni visit her? Could she receive him? Midnight was at hand. Still in undefined suspense, in intense anxiety, she lingered in the room. The quarter before midnight sounded, dull and distant. All was still, and she was about to pass to her sleeping quarter when she heard the hoofs of a horse at full speed. The sound ceased. There was a knock at the door. Her heart beat violently, but fear gave way to another sentiment when she heard a voice, too well known, calling on her name. She paused, and then, with the fearlessness of innocence, descended and unbarred the door. Zanoni entered with a light and hasty step. His horseman's cloak fitted tightly to his noble form, and his broad hat threw a gloomy shade over his commanding features. The girl followed him into the room she had just left, trembling and blushing deeply, and stood before him with the lamp she held shining upward on her cheek, and the long hair that fell like a shower of light over the half-clad shoulders and heaving bust. "Viola," said Zanoni, in a voice that spoke deep emotion, "I am by thy side once more to save thee. Not a moment is to be lost. Thou must fly with me, or remain the victim of the prince. I would have made the charge I now undertake another's. Thou knowest I would. Thou knowest it. But he is not worthy of thee, the cold Englishman. I throw myself at thy feet. Have trust in me, and fly." He grasped her hand passionately as he dropped on his knee, and looked up into her face with his bright, beseeching eyes. "Fly with thee," said Viola, scarce believing her senses. "With me, name, fame, all will be sacrificed, if thou dost not." Then, said the wild girl, falteringly, and turning aside her face, "then I am not indifferent to thee. Thou wouldst not give me to another." Zanoni was silent, but his breast heaved, his cheeks flushed, his eyes darted dark and impassioned fire. "Speak!" exclaimed Viola, in jealous suspicion of his silence. "Indifferent to me? No, but I dare not yet say that I love thee." "Then what matters my fate?" said Viola, turning pale, and shrinking from his side. "Leave me. I fear no danger. My life, and therefore my honor, is in mine own hands." "Be not so mad," said Zanoni. "Hark! Do you hear the neigh of my steed? It is an alarm that warns us of the approaching peril. Haste, or you are lost." "Why dost thou care for me?" said the girl bitterly. "Thou hast read my heart. Thou knowest that thou art become the lord of my destiny. But to be bound beneath the weight of a cold obligation, to be the beggar on the eyes of indifference, to cast myself on one who loves me not, that were indeed the vilest sin of my sex. Ah, Zanoni, rather let me die." She had thrown back her clustering hair from her face while she spoke, and as she now stood, with her arms drooping mournfully, and her hands clasped together with the proud bitterness of her wayward spirit, giving new zest and charm to her singular beauty, it was impossible to conceive a sight more irresistible to the eye and the heart. "Tempt me not to thine own danger, perhaps destruction," exclaimed Zanoni in faltering accents. "Thou canst not dream of what thou wouldst demand. Come!" And advancing, he wound his arm round her waist. "Come, Viola, believe at least in my friendship, my honor, my protection." "And not thy love," said the Italian, turning on him her reproachful eyes. Those eyes met his, and he could not withdraw from the charm of their gaze. He felt her heart throbbing beneath his own. Her breath came warm upon his cheek. He trembled. He, the lofty, the mysterious Zanoni, who seemed to stand aloof from his race. With a deep and burning sigh, he murmured, "Viola, I love thee." "Oh," he continued passionately, and releasing his hold, he threw himself abruptly at her feet. "I no more command. As woman should be wooed, I woo thee. From the first glance of those eyes, from the first sound of thy voice, thou becamest too fatally dear to me. Thou speakest of fascination. It lives and it breathes in thee. I fled from Naples to fly from thy presence. It pursued me. Months, years passed, and thy sweet face still shone upon my heart. I returned because I pictured thee alone and sorrowful in the world, and knew that dangers, from which I might save thee, were gathering near thee and around. Beautiful soul, whose leaves I have read with reverence, it was for thy sake, thine alone, that I would have given thee to one who might make thee happier on earth than I can. Viola, Viola, thou knowest not, never canst thou know, how dear thou art to me." It is in vain to seek for words to describe the delight, the proud, the full, the complete, and the entire delight that filled the heart of the Neapolitan. He whom she had considered too lofty even for love, more humble to her than those she had half despised. She was silent, but her eyes spoke to him. And then slowly, as aware at last that the human love had advanced on the ideal, she shrank into the terrors of a modest and virtuous nature. She did not dare, she did not dream, to ask him the question she had so fearlessly made to Glyndon, but she felt a sudden coldness, a sense that a barrier was yet between love and love. "O Zanoni," she murmured, with downcast eyes, "ask me not to fly with thee. Tempt me not to my shame. Thou wouldst protect me from others. Oh, protect me from thyself." "Poor orphan," said he tenderly, "and canst thou think that I ask from thee one sacrifice, still less the greatest that woman can give to love? As my wife I woo thee, and by every tie, and by every vow that can hallow and endear affection. Alas, they have belied love to thee indeed, if thou dost not know the religion that belongs to it. They who truly love would seek, for the treasure they obtain, every bond that can make it lasting and secure. Viola, weep not, unless thou givest me the holy right to kiss away thy tears." And that beautiful face, no more averted, drooped upon his bosom, and as he bent down, his lips sought the rosy mouth, a long and burning kiss. Danger, life, the world, was forgotten. Suddenly Zanoni tore himself from her. "Hearest thou the wind that sighs and dies away? As that wind, my power to preserve thee, to guard thee, to foresee the storm in thy skies, is gone. No matter. Haste, haste, and may love supply the loss of all that it has dared to sacrifice. Come!" Viola hesitated no more. She threw her mantle over her shoulders and gathered up her disheveled hair. A moment and she was prepared, when a sudden crash was heard below. "Too late! Fool that I was! Too late!" cried Zanoni, in a sharp tone of agony, as he hurried to the door. He opened it, only to be borne back by the press of armed men. The room literally swarmed with the followers of the ravisher, masked and armed to the teeth. Viola was already in the grasp of two of the myrmidons. Her shriek smote the ear of Zanoni. He sprang forward, and Viola heard his wild cry in a foreign tongue. She saw the blades of the ruffians point at his breast. She lost her senses, and when she recovered, she found herself gagged, and in a carriage that was driven rapidly by the side of a masked and motionless figure. The carriage stopped at the portals of a gloomy mansion. The gates opened noiselessly. A broad flight of steps, brilliantly illumined, was before her. She was in the palace of the prince.